Hello there, you're watching All 24 News live from Algiers. Coming up next are your headlines. The storming of the Capitol was an attempted coup, a charge against Donald Trump, according to the head of the parliamentary inquiry. Algeria and Venezuela agreed on Thursday to increase their economic cooperation. Two British men and a Moroccan captured while fighting in the Ukrainian army in Mariupol have been sentenced to death by pro-Russia officials. US President and Brazil President have agreed to work together on preventing further deforestation of the Amazon. Hello again, I'm Karim Fazakari, and those were today's headlines. First in our news, Algeria and Venezuela agreed on Thursday to increase their economic cooperation during a visit to Algiers by Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Marwa Blawiwer with more details.
Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune received Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro on Thursday following a visit to Turkey. Venezuelan leader was welcomed with a ceremony when he arrived Wednesday evening. He was greeted at the Algiers airport by Algeria's Prime Minister Ayman bin Abdurrahman for his two-day working and friendship visit. Maduro and President Abdelmajid Tebboune reviewed a detachment of the Republican Guard as the anthems of both countries were played. After that, both presidents had talks, but there were no immediate information on discussed file during the meeting. Maduro paid tribute to the martyrs of Algeria's brutal war of independence, laying a wreath of flowers at the national monument as the delegations had a minute of silence. President Abdelmajid Tebboune announced during a joint press conference with Maduro, Algeria and Venezuela agreed to establish an agenda of mutual economic cooperation that includes the opening of air travel between Algiers and Caracas.
Regarding the bilateral relation, we also agreed to consolidate the economic and cultural relations and to open an airline between Caracas and Algeria in 2 months. This is what we agreed in general.
Venezuelan president expressed his satisfaction following the decision, noting that the two countries are willing to strengthen their cooperation, especially in oil and gas.
We have decided to build a powerful economic, commercial and financial agenda of joint work, of common prosperity between both countries.
It is worth noting that Algeria and Venezuela are members of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. The president of the Bolivarian Republic.
On Thursday, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ramtal Lamamra, received the UN Secretary General's Special Advisor for Libya, Ms. Stephanie Williams, who is on a welcome visit to Algeria. According to the ministry statement, the two sides discussed political and security developments in Libya, as well as efforts and the supports of the United Nations to overcome current divisions within the Libyan parties and reach a consensus on political conditions, security, and legal for transparent elections. Moving on now, Spain's foreign minister said he regrets Algeria's decision Wednesday to immediately suspend a 2-decade-old friendship and cooperation treaty with this country. More in this report.
الشيء اللي قامت به إسبانيا غير مقبول أخلاقيا وتاريخيا.
Algeria is immediately suspending a 2-decade-old friendship treaty with Spain after Madrid reversed decades of neutrality in the Western Sahara dispute. The president's office said in a statement on Wednesday that Algeria has decided to immediately suspend the treaty of friendship, good neighborliness, and cooperation signed with Madrid in 2002. Madrid and Algiers had signed a deal in 2002 to promote dialogue and cooperation on political, economic, financial, education, and defense issues. Algeria's Banking Association issued a statement telling banks that import goods and services from Spain to stop doing so because the treaty was suspended. Spain's government said it regretted Algeria's decision and reaffirmed its commitment to the friendship treaty. The Spanish government regards Algeria as a friendly neighbor country and restates its complete readiness to keep and develop the special cooperation relationship between our two countries to the benefit of the people of both, a Spanish Foreign Ministry statement said.
This will have important economic consequences. First, for our companies, which have good commercial relations with their Algerian counterparts. And second, it'll have an impact in respect to the general interest and the bill we pay. We are talking about something very important, which is gas import. This will have a big impact on the bill.
Algeria's move came in retaliation after Spain in March publicly recognized Morocco's autonomy plan for the disputed territory of Western Sahara, helping end a year-long diplomatic spat between the two kingdoms. But Algeria said Wednesday that Spain's move had been in violation of its legal, moral, and political obligations towards the territory. That reflects the complex challenge Madrid faces in balancing its ties with both states. It's worth recalling that Algeria is a key gas supplier to Spain and is expected to review prices for any new gas contract with Spanish firms. The Algerian government is a reliable partner and has given Spain guarantees at the highest level regarding its gas supply. Foreign Minister José Manuel Alvarez told reporters when asked if Algeria could now adopt measures against Spain involving gas and migration issues.
To a different matter now, the storming of the Capitol was an attempted coup, says the head of the parliamentary inquiry while presenting his first conclusions on the role of Donald Trump in the attack of January 6, 2021. Hassan Barkan in this report.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump is at the center of a coup attempt. This is what the U.S. House of Representatives Parliamentary Inquiry Committee concluded during its presentation of the first results on the storming of the Capitol building on January 6, 2021. After nearly a year and a half of collecting evidence through more than 1,000 investigations and about 100,000 official documents, the first results of the investigation appear. An investigation that seeks to answer an important question that has been long remained unanswered. What is the role of the former President Donald Trump? The chairman of the investigation committee and Democratic Congressman Benny Thompson considered that the rioters in the Capitol acted with the encouragement of Trump and that the attack on the headquarters of Congress constituted what he described as a culmination of a coup attempt.
January 6th was the culmination of an attempted coup, a brazen attempt, as one rioter put it shortly after January 6th, to overthrow the government. The violence was no accident.
Scenes of storming process, witnesses who lived through the events, and testimonies of Trump aides presented for the first time, which the Commission says are evidence indicating the involvement of the former U.S. president and his support for groups to cancel or disrupt the ratification of the election results.
On this point, there is no room for debate. Those who invaded our Capitol and battled law enforcement for hours were motivated by what President Trump had told them, that the election was stolen and that he was the rightful president. President Trump summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack.
Supporters of this committee considered its work essential, so that one of the most dangerous chapters in American history is never repeated, while Republicans led by Donald Trump criticized it and in turn threatened to end its work if they managed to control the House of Representatives in the midterm elections.
U.S. President Joe Biden and Brazil President Jair Bolsonaro have agreed during a meeting at an Americas summit in Los Angeles to work together on preventing further deforestation of the Amazon, where Brazil's right-wing leader complained to Biden about international pressure over the Amazon rainforest.
You've made some real sacrifices as a country in the way you've tried to protect the Amazon, which is a great carbon sink in the world, and I think the rest of the world should be participating in helping you finance being able to preserve as much as you can. It seems like it's an international responsibility. We all benefit from it. But
2 British men and a Moroccan captured while fighting in the Ukrainian army in Mariupol have been sentenced to death by pro-Russia officials. The 3 were convicted of being foreign mercenaries. The court said they now have 1 month to appeal and will possibly receive a reduced sentence. The ruling was quickly condemned by British officials. The Russian Foreign Minister, meanwhile, Sergei Lavrov, said Britons and Moroccans sentenced to death committed crimes in Donetsk. Speaking at an event with young entrepreneurs in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin appeared to be hinting at further territorial expansion in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the country's troops are holding on in cities in the Donbas region. Abil Khazini with more details.
Since the beginning of what Moscow calls Phase 2 of its military operation in Ukraine, the Russians have since centered their forces in eastern Ukraine's disputed Donbas region, capturing the strategic port city of Mariupol and securing a coastal corridor to the Moscow-annexed Crimean Peninsula. In Moscow, the Russian president appeared to ominously hint at further territorial expansion. It's impossible to build a fence around a country like Russia, and we do not intend to build that fence, says Vladimir Putin. His Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky, meanwhile, says actions, not words, are needed for his country.
Democracy is always respect for words, and international law is also about respect for words, but they only work and they could only be active if they're backed with actions, when a word literally means actions.
Back to the east of Ukraine, in Kharkiv, authorities say 3 civilians were killed and 5 were wounded after a suspected missile hit a cafe, supermarket and school library, all located in the same neighborhood. But in the Baltic Sea, NATO forces conducted live-fire air defense exercises in Poland, a test of readiness to respond to any possible attacks.
It is for us really important, more than ever, that we are able to train and to get this capacity growing in these current circumstances. It is a clear message, a clear expression of NATO commitment to readiness.
And from the other side of the same sea, this footage released by Russian Ministry of Defense shows Russian naval vessels carrying out what the ministry said were planned operation drills in the Baltic Sea.
To the repercussions of the war now, Russia and Ukraine produce a third of the world's wheat supply, and the loss of commodities due to the war has resulted in soaring food prices and uncertainty about the future of food security globally, especially in impoverished countries. Usama Ayadi with more details.
The World Food Programme is warning of catastrophic failure in food supply chains, which could lead to starvation and global instability. Known as the breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine has over 25 million tons of grain that cannot be exported due to Russia's claimed blockade of its Black Sea ports, while Russia is accusing Ukraine of not taking a decisive decision in concerns of the matter.
Still 25 million tons of grain and oilseeds left in Ukraine. That's the third of last year's harvest. So we already have a huge logistical problem.
Ukraine and Russia together export a third of the world's wheat and barely half of its sunflower oil, while Russia is the top supplier of fertilizer that has surged in price.
I'm really anxious. I mean, the only option is to get the grain out of Ukraine is through the Black Sea ports. They have to be opened. That's the only option.
The European Commission made proposals Thursday aimed at helping Ukraine export its agricultural goods and circumvent a claimed Russian blockade of the country's ports that is preventing critical supplies of grains from reaching the global market.
Apart from economic and food security reasons, pressure is mounting to free storage capacity for the coming harvest. So, 20 million tons of grains must leave Ukraine in less than 3 months.
The European Union's executive arm said the plan, largely based on the establishment of alternative logistic routes and an increase of freight services using all transport modes, should also facilitate imports of goods, including humanitarian aid, into the war-torn country.
So, if we do the math, we will see that an astonishing 10,000 barges and almost 300 large ships are needed to carry 20 million tons of grains.
As an impact of the war in Ukraine, shortages of fuel and fertilizer in many countries and accelerating spikes in food prices threaten to destabilize fragile societies, increase hunger and malnutrition, drive migration, and cause severe economic dislocation. Conflict has greatly exacerbated food security issues globally.
3 days after surviving a vote of no confidence led by his own party, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned against any desire on the party of the West to encourage Ukraine to accept a bad compromise with Russia. His speech comes following the UK's announcement to supply Ukraine with long-range rocket artillery, despite threats from the Russian President Vladimir Putin of hitting new targets if the West continues to take similar steps.
To encourage a bad peace in Ukraine is to encourage Putin and to encourage all those around the world who believe that aggression pays. And that would be a mistake that would open the door to further conflict, further instability, further global uncertainty, and therefore further economic misery.
To a more economic note on the Russia-Ukraine file, the European Central Bank sharply raised its inflation forecast on Thursday, while lowering those for the GDP growth for the year 2022 and 2023 in the Eurozone, due to the war in Ukraine, which will continue to weigh on the economy. For the Eurozone, the institution now expects inflation of 6.8% in 2022, which should then settle down to 3.5% in 2023 and remain with 2.1% in 2024, still above its 2% target.
Once current headwinds abate, economic activity is expected to pick up again. This outlook is broadly reflected in the Eurosystem staff projections, which foresee annual real GDP growth at 2.8% in 22, 2.1% in 23, and 2.1% in 24.
The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Thursday that Iran was increasing the complexity of efforts to save the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Blinken said in a statement that Tehran's nuclear provocations could cause a serious nuclear crisis, leading to further economic and political isolation of Iran. Tens of thousands of people marched in Buenos Aires on Thursday to demand better paying and more secure employment, as well as to oppose the government's agreement with the International Monetary Fund. In March, President Alberto Fernandez's government agreed to negotiate or renegotiate a $44 billion debt to the International Monetary Fund, allowing them to avoid defaulting on the loans. The agreement, which includes measures like expenditures cutbacks, has stoked tensions within the ruling coalition.
There is adjustment underway in Argentina. The government insists on responding to the demands of the International Monetary Fund and not to people that ask for work, food, that job insecurity ends, that workers have a real job with a salary as it should be.
And the truth is that I'm sick. The truth is that we cannot sustain ourselves, that we cannot pay taxes with anything. We can't get a job. We are living from day to day, having to eat a little in the soup kitchens. We can't provide healthy, nutritious food for our children.
Brazilian authorities and indigenous groups continue the search on Thursday for the British journalist and indigenous official in a remote area of the Amazon rainforest. Civil police in Amazonas state said they had identified a suspect who was arrested for allegedly carrying a firearm without a permit, which is common practice in the region. 6 people have been questioned and a man has been detained as a suspect by Brazilian police, who are trying to determine if he has a connection to the disappearance of the journalist. The Colombian presidential candidate Rodolfo Hernandez cancels his public speeches 10 days before the elections because he says he fears being assassinated. Describing it as a thug's campaign at Miami news conference, Hernandez stated that he has had threats of killing him. In Mexico, the migrant caravan paused on Thursday to obtain temporary visas, allowing them to transit throughout Mexico and continue with hopes of reaching the United States. Thousands arrived in Huizalta, where they heard of the announcement of visa concessions for undocumented immigrants. U.S. President Joe Biden announced at the Summit of the Americas a number of nations will join the United States in announcing a Los Angeles Declaration on Migration and Protection. Immigration has been high on the agenda at the summit in Los Angeles. However, the absence of leaders from Mexico and other countries that send many migrants north has raised questions about how much progress would be made on it.
Each one of our countries have been impacted by unprecedented migration. And I believe it's our shared responsibility to meet this challenge, and I emphasize shared. Tomorrow, a number of us will join in announcing the Los Angeles Declaration on Migration and Protection. This will bring our nations together around a transformative new approach to invest in the region and solutions that embrace stability.
To other news now. According to figures, the average price of a liter of diesel at South Korean petrol pumps has surpassed the price of gasoline for the first time in nearly 14 years, putting huge pressure on the country's transportation industry and facing dozens of truckers to go on strike in response to the fuel crisis. According to truckers, the cost of diesel in South Korea has increased, and fuel now accounts for up to 60% of the cost of freight shipping in South Korea, up from 30% before the last wave of oil inflation.
I search online almost every day to find the cheapest gas station, and if I find I can save about $1 or $2 per liter, I search online almost every day to find the cheapest gas station, and if I find I can save about $1, $2 per liter.
Thailand declared marijuana legal to plant and possess on Thursday. Dozens of Thai described it as a dream that came true for an elderly generation of cannabis users who remember the thrill of the famed Thai stick Thai provided. During this time, the government released nearly 3,000 prisoners who were selling and smoking marijuana. The country's public health ministers declared intention to distribute 1 million marijuana seedings beginning on Friday, has added to the notion that Thailand is becoming a pot paradise. A Michigan prosecutor said a charge of second-degree murder was filed on Thursday against a white police officer who fatally shot a black man during a traffic stop in Grand Rapids 2 months ago. The decision to charge the officer on April 4th shooting death of a 26-year-old Congolese refugee was announced at a news conference by the Kent County prosecuting attorney. Following Moscow's military operation in Ukraine, Finland's candidacy for NATO membership has reignited controversy about the status of the demilitarized Finnish archipelago of the Åland Islands. Sofian Kinturi with more.
The independent Åland Islands, strewn between Sweden and Finland, are a scenic archipelago that was previously part of Russia, but has been demilitarized since 1856. However, since Russia began a military operation in Ukraine, which prompted Finland to request for NATO membership, the region's special position has been the subject of heated controversy.
The President of Finland, Mr. Sauli Niinistö, and also the Minister Pekka Haavisto, they have made it very clear that there is no problem with Åland demilitarization and neutralization if Finland decides to join NATO.
No soldiers or fortification are allowed on important Baltic Sea islands, under international treaties agreed after Crimean conflict.
Demilitarization has served us well. We have always thought, who would want to attack us when we have nothing worth taking? But it has changed with Putin's war in Ukraine. Nobody thought he would do it. Nobody believed it. But he still started a war.
Thousands of rocky islets, beautiful landscapes, and demilitarized zones under the careful eye of Russian consulate under treaties with Russia going back over 160 years. Any military presence in the Finnish archipelago of the land islands is possible.
It can happen that these areas could be a pretext for Putin or someone else to say that they have to come here and control everything, control the demilitarization. Then they would need a base, which they can build here.
Finally, following Moscow's military operation in Ukraine, Finland's candidacy for NATO membership has reignited controversy over military posture of this independent archipelago of 30,000 people, laying halfway between Sweden and Finland in the Baltic Sea.
And with this, ladies and gentlemen, our program reached the end. This is Karim Fazakiri signing off. Thank you for tuning in, and bye for now.